Sometimes what I will do with some of my new players or clients, if they're really on, social media, or I say Dr. Google, they're constantly looking up what's going on with them and their symptomology. And that's why I go back to the book, Hole in One Nutrition. So in the book, I have a nutrition food pyramid, and basically the bottom is hydration, the middle tier is whole food, and the top tier is supplements. So, it's really simplified. It's nothing complicated. And within that, in terms of hydration, we can get really deep into the woods. And so I think that's where people can start off. So even in our conversation today, if there's one thing that you get out of today, if you don't drink half your body weight ounces of water, then that's a starting point of where to go with in terms of hydration, because your body's made about 65, 70% water on average, depending on the parts of your body that we could be talking about. So if you're not drinking water, replacing on a daily basis, then you're really behind just from a biochemical perspective.
And let's see, we are live with Robert Yang. Robert, thank you very much for coming on the show. You, with your background and all you do, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on,
Very,
Pete.
very excited.
Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Your book, I'm sure a lot of people out there who are golf fanatics, Hole in One Nutrition, a guide to fueling better golf, has been read by numerous people. If they haven't, I highly recommend it. Of course, we'll have a one-click link to that in the description. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is golf coaches will have some very, very heated debates, and many of them have been widely known. I mean, we had the alpha wars that has seemed to fizzle out. Now we've got discrepancies in using the bounce and chipping and short game. But I tell some of them, as I try to stay involved in nutrition and everything, as the people I have on the show, is you guys are nothing compared to the nutrition side of the world. Because the nutrition side, those guys and girls go at it fierce. So,
oh yeah, some of them are zealots, and they treat it like religion at sometimes. So, it's definitely can be pretty intense with some of the conversations. And it's the landscape has changed. So basically with your phone, tip of your finger, you can get all kinds of information. So I think for a lot of the golfers, that's where there wasn't really a source where I felt like players could go to where they could find some good solid information in terms of how the body functions, and hey, okay, this is what I should probably do most of the time, which will help me to have better energy, helping to recover, those kinds of things for golf. So that's why I came up with the Hole in One Nutrition book.
There are so many diets out there nowadays. You got keto, paleo, primal, Atkins.
Right.
I saw Mark Bell was doing an all sugar diet. That's kind of hard to believe that could be good for you long term, but maybe it has its merits. How does somebody know what direction to go if they just get bombarded in today's world in the information age? How do they determine? Do they have to reach out to somebody like you who's extremely well educated and knowledgeable in these things, or are they able to just? Wouldn't recommend trial and error, but what would be your recommendation? Let's say somebody's here in South Carolina and you're in California and they can't necessarily come see you on a regular basis, but how does someone determine what to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think sometimes what I will do with some of my new players or clients, if they're really on social media, or I say Dr. Google, they're constantly looking up what's going on with them and their symptomology, and that's why I go back to the book, Hole in One Nutrition. So in the book, I have a nutrition food pyramid, and basically the bottom is hydration, the middle tier is whole food, and the top tier is supplements. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's really simplified. It's nothing complicated. And within that, in terms of hydration, we can get really deep into the woods. And so I think that's where people can start off. So even in our conversation today, if there's one thing that you get out of today, if you don't drink half your body weight ounces of water, then that's a starting point of where to go with in terms of hydration, because your body's made about 65, 70% water on average, depending on the parts of your body that we could be talking about. So if you're not drinking water, replacing on a daily basis, then you're really behind just from a biochemical perspective.
Andrew Huberman, I'm a big fan of his. He's made it very popular with his show to first thing in the morning. He had, that don't know if I can't remember what Huberman protocol that
Hmm.
have a glass of water with either sea salt or some sort of minerals in it first thing in the morning, and then do your morning walk.
Right.
Try to hold caffeine off until a few hours after awake. But is that starting out the day with water? I think you've had a few articles and posts about that as well, to the benefits
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. So one of the things that you'll find in the book is um, I would say one of the most critical times to consume water is first thing in the morning when you wake up. So um, people don't realize is that hopefully most people are sleeping from, let's say, 10 to 6. So hopefully you're getting
Hmm.
your 8 hours a night. Um, and what happens is that just by respiration, and then right now we're in summertime, so you're probably sweating more than usual. You might be a sweater, but you lose water as you're breathing and through perspiration. Some people go to the bathroom, they forget about it, they go back to bed. So technically, you wake up in a dehydrated state, and in the literature, we call it insatiable water loss. And so, basically, what happens is that you lose water when you're sleeping for 8 hours, and so you need to replenish that right away. And I'm a big coffee consumer. I believe in coffee up to a certain point, but I always recommend people get water and then they get their salt first thing in the morning. So for myself, for example, this is 16 ounces. So I have a mason jar technically at home. So I have that right
Hmm.
by the coffee maker. So I fill that up. I take a teaspoon of Celtic sea salt and I put that in my mouth and I just basically chug the first 16 ounces. And then as I'm getting vitamins out and making coffee for my wife and for myself, then I'm drinking my second cup. So pretty much within the next, within 30 minutes, I'm having probably about a liter of water with about a teaspoon of salt. So for me, that is what I do. For other people, I might have them use less salt. For other people, I might have them actually use a little bit more salt, depending on what's going on in their body. But the hydration aspect is very, very, very important in the morning.
You had mentioned salt. Is there a difference in the? I know there's a mineral uh, structure difference, but for people out there listening who are online or they're talking to friends or whoever they're getting their info from, you obviously have the Celtic sea salt. Many people are somewhat now familiar with Himalayan sea salt, and then
Mhm.
of course you have your table salt. Can you just let people know or differentiate between the three? Because if they're just grabbing table salt, I don't think it's as nutrient dense as, let's say, the other two might be.
Yeah, so basically the main difference between, let's say, the Celtic sea salt or redmond salt, and then regular table salt, like a Morton salt, is that um, basically and this is what's interesting when I was doing a lot of research, is that with normal salt that you see at all the restaurants and what's typically used, um, the far majority of salt is produced for industrial purposes. It's not for basically, oh, we need a lot of salt for human consumption.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's heated, it's chemically treated, and so it's just straight sodium chloride. So the difference is that, for example, if you get something like I have Celtic sea salt here, and you get it out, it it looks dirty. It's somewhat moist, so you can't just use it in the salt shaker and shake it out. So there's a lot of other trace minerals that are found in Celtic sea salt and some of the other sea salts. And For example, with Celtic sea salt, their claim to fame is, they don't chemically treat it, heat it. It's basically just harvested and then it's sun, wind that dries it out and then they
Mhm.
package it. Um, I, I don't make any money off that. I've been recommending for over 20 years, but I just find it's a high quality salt. And I tell people, sometimes we use that. Sometimes we use Himalayan. Sometimes we have red bean salt. So we use a wide variety of salts. But when we're talking about, let's say, for example, I usually will not say never. Um, and so some people say, oh, never use Morton sea salt. Well, I've had some of my golfers, and they're cramping and they're struggling to make it finish their round. So at that point, you use any sodium that you can because usually in extreme cases, they probably are lacking the electrolytes if they're cramping and they're having those kinds of issues. Whatever it takes to finish around, make it off the course safely. At that point, potato chips, Lay's potato chips, something that's really salty, use regular salt is fine in that situation, give it. But for the far majority of the time, for your cooking and adding salt to your water, I find that that can be helpful because you're getting the other trace minerals in there.
Excuse me. One of your many things that you're involved in and up there with the best of the best is TPI advisory um, board and a lead instructor for golf. And I'm a fan of Dr. Andy Galpin's, and I saw recently, I think as early as a couple of months ago, he joined the TPI
Yeah.
team. And I bring that up because I listen to I listen to his podcast when I can, but I've heard him talk numerous times about the ability to what type of salt you're going to use based off if you're profusely sweating, if you don't think you're sweating enough. And I don't remember the specifics, but as we're talking a little bit on salt and golf performance, I might as well ask you, how would somebody, let's say that they're a profuse sweater and I mean, when it's 90 degrees out, everybody's going to sweat a lot, but
Yeah.
somebody's sweating what they would deem abnormally a lot, or somebody who's sweating what they would be abnormally not very much. How would their salt intake or what type they're going to use, let's say in the morning or throughout the day, be able to be adjusted based off what condition they're trying to improve?
Well, I don't know in the context of what Andy Galpin's talking about in terms of the change in salt.
Hmm.
Um, I do what I would recommend for people to do is that if they're whether they want to use a regular sea salt, Celtic sea salt, or a lot of people are gravitating towards using packets like hydration packets because that's a big market these days. So I tend to favor some of the formulas that have the higher sodium content. So, for example, most people know Element, um,
Hmm.
and so theirs is 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet. And I think that's probably the most optimal way to go, especially for our golfers that are sweating. And, I've got a lot of, juniors and just in general that play a ton in summertime. It's just that time of the year. So I recommend that they use a lot of sodium because they've done some studies with subjects where they have them exercising in a gym. Like obviously, this is my studio in the background. And so they collect all the sweat off their body, and 99% of the electrolyte is sodium. So
Wow.
it's pretty difficult to overload on sodium. I think that's been it's been a myth for a long time. And so in that case, when you have an athlete who's sweating quite a bit profusely due to environmental reasons, other reasons, at that point, I think the higher sodium product is going to be really the most optimal choice for those particular people. And then, for some of our, you know, weekend warriors or just some of our older clients that just play golf every day, they're not they're not drinking enough water typically, and they're not getting the electrolytes in the system. So technically, what happens is either they get cramping in their calves or their hamstrings. Sometimes they get twitching in like the tricep or the quad, or they get twitching of the eyes. Normally, what I
Hmm.
look at first is water first, get their sodium levels up to a certain degree, and then after that, we look at things like magnesium and so forth. But again, it just that base and foundation for my nutrition pyramid is going to be hydration, and part of that hydration process is sodium, getting the electrolytes in there.
It seems very interesting, and this is one question I had written down for some time that I wanted to ask you. With the somewhat of the changes in food. Let's say we're approximately close to the same age, best I can tell. I'm follically challenged. You got a great head of hair, but mine would be gray if I had it. But just speaking to let's say somebody who grew up in the 70s and 80s, and then
Mhm.
early adult 90s, etc. That the food has changed somewhat over the course of that time, and the content, meaning it seems to be have more sodium in it as um, a preservative or helping to preserve the food.
Right.
Are you seeing that, or I find it odd, or what do you see where kids and people who are active are low in sodium, even in today's diet where it seems to be more prevalent in the food? Is it just not the type of sodium that they're needing, or they're burning through that and they need supplemental in the form of electrolytes or sea salts or et cetera?
Well, I think that's a good question because obviously, in terms of where the health recommendations have gone from the 70s, 80s, and 90s was, you know, low fat, make sure to, go low sugar and then low sodium. Um, when they when they talk about those recommendations, obviously there's a lot of confounding factors where it could be high sugar and high sodium. That's concomitant in some of the disease populations or whatever they're talking about in research studies. And so there is a concern that, okay, well, if you have a high processed diet or, they have I just joke around, they have a 7-Eleven diet. So they basically eat 7-Eleven breakfast, lunch, dinner. Then yes, the sodium that they have may not be good for that particular person. Um, you know, it might be helpful, I would say, for some of our young juniors that are just, out there playing practicing for 6 hours a day, playing in tournaments for 4 to 5 hours a day. And that's probably maybe what helps them not cramp and so forth. But it's a big question to try to answer. I don't think there's one answer to that situation. Then you have individual differences that will apply to those situations. When we're talking about something like that, um, especially with some of my elite female players, or just female clients that have low blood pressure and they're very small, petite, you have to almost be quite aggressive with sodium with those types of people because um, as much as high blood pressure is an issue, and that's obviously there's stress involved, there's hydration, maybe sodium's part of that. Um, but low blood pressure is a problem with a lot of our
Hmm.
young female players coming up because if you don't have enough blood pressure, you're not getting perfusion into your hands and feet. Thus, they have cold hands and feet, even though it's really warm
Wow,
outside.
very
They're
interesting.
not getting perfusion to their brain. So that means that they're not getting the blood flow uh, to their brain for cognition. They can struggle from digestive issues because you're not getting enough perfusion into your digestive system. So um, it's not talked about enough and it needs to be addressed. So oftentimes I'm always talking about someone's blood pressure as a new player client, whether they have low blood pressure or if they have high blood pressure, and it definitely needs to be addressed. And once their water salt is up to a certain level and they're sort of stagnated on their BP, then we have to start to look at other things that could help raise their blood pressure to a more normal level.
Yeah, I was reading some articles this morning, and one of them said that 80% of people who lose weight on whatever particular diet they're on, but we'll say keto because keto seems to be the very popular one in most
Hmm.
recent times. 80% of people within 5 years will gain all that weight back. Do you think that is just they've gone so hard into their diet and focused on it that after that period of time they just get tired of doing the same thing, or do you think that they're not accepting that it's more of a lifestyle change, whether they're an athlete or whether they're an everyday Joe? An athlete meaning anything from junior to professional. But yeah, that's a broad spectrum, I know. Very broad stroke. But have you seen anything as somebody who's been in the industry for so long on why people who get into a diet program or a lifestyle change don't seem to maintain that change, even though they know it's better for them?
Which you actually brought two good topics. So a diet change and then lifestyle change. So when it's a diet change, normally people think about a diet and you think, okay, it's going to be for the next 3 months, or it's going to be for
Hmm.
Lent, or it's going to be for, okay, from January to March, I'm going to get shredded, whatever that is for springtime, summertime. Um, Whereas a lifestyle change is really what you're doing for the long term. And so um, if you look at the literature and you look about what creates the highest success rate for, let's say, weight loss or maintaining weight loss, it's consistency. So it didn't really matter if it was the plant based or paleo or keto or carnivore, but what could that person be consistent on? So that's why when I'm working with someone, I always tell them, look, it's lifestyle that we have to really go after. Um, there's no question that um, any sort of plan will work. Keto will work. And I've done keto for many years. I mean, the first time I think I've done some type of keto type plan was back in 93. So everything that we see in nutrition is typically like fashion. And I was just talking that with my golfers just before I got on the call with you, is that he talked and asked about creatine because he saw whatever
Hmm.
viral video from ASU, the players were doing creatine, and the coach is saying, "Oh, my players do creatine," and one guy was shotgunning a scoop full of creatine in his mouth and then chugging some water. Um, it's just fashion, depending on where the influencers are and what the influencers are talking about in social media, what Huberman's talking about. Those types of people, they're going to drive a lot of that market. And so it's not to say it's bad. It's just that creatine's been here for a long time. I mean, the first time I used creatine was back in 94, maybe
Hmm.
93. So it's nothing new. Um, the good thing is that there's more literature coming out um, about the effects of it beyond just muscle mass and strength and explosive power. There's some
I
good
think the
literature
mental
coming on the
capacity is
cognition.
the recent. Yes, cognition. I think
Right.
Dr. Rhonda Patrick's been
Cognition.
talking a lot about that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, I just don't have time to listen to everybody. So someone
Hmm.
will send me something and then I might listen to it. And I think she said 20 grams was something that you would see a massive effect. Um, and I didn't listen to, it was a very, very, whatever short clip. But now already I'm thinking, well, okay, well, have you ever taken 20 grams at one time? And most people will go, oh, I don't know. Well, when we took 20 grams a day, one of the things and side effects you get is you get diarrhea, you get loose stools, or you get nausea, or you get bloated, or you get stomach because your digestive system is unable to handle that kind of load. Now, there's little tricks to the trade to help to try to help with the absorbability of that. But those are the things that people don't really talk about, and people go out and do it in 20 grams. Well, get ready. You probably need to go use the bathroom in a couple hours. Not everybody. There's a certain percentage of people that are just able to break it down. But those are the things that you do have to factor in. And with something like creatine, since we're talking about it, consistency again is the key. So a lot of people, they're listening to a podcast or they're listening to, um, somebody, and then they buy it, and then they take it every other day, and then they don't take it for a week, and then they take it
Hmm.
for a week straight, and they go, "Oh, it doesn't work." Well, it does work. You just have to be very consistent with things like creatine, and as with anything like water, you have to be consistent with water intake. You can't do half your body ounces of water for a day and then not do it for a couple days and then go back to it. Then you're going to see really inconsistencies in your results or how you want to feel.
I know creatine. I'll be 53 in a few weeks, but I have noticed. I started taking that. God, probably early 2000s, and for me, it was almost like a steroid. What I could started pushing in the weight room, and then when I would cycle off it, um, because back then, remember, you had to load up. The thought process was you loaded up in the first 5 to 7 days, and then you tapered it down to maintenance level. And I don't remember what it was then, 5 or 10 grams. And now I think most people the recommendation is to take 10 to start, or 5 to 10 range, but I have increased it a little bit. But I know for myself is, and for some of the students that I teach that are Division I or playing professional golf, their distances and mine jumped because they're doing more weight in the gym. So that whether it's neural processing increases or just pure strength or whatever it is, that they're unable to control their distances to the level that they need to. So I say, you're on creatine again, aren't you? And like, how do you know? I'm like, well, I'm a little older than you. I've gone through that experience, good or bad. But the mental side has been noted. But the one thing that I've noticed myself and some of the players that I've had is when they have taken it, especially in our area, because it's so humid and hot in the summer here in the Southeast, cramping plays a very big role when they're taken. So I tell them, look, back it down to, if you're on 10 to 15, back it down to 5. And I'm not a nutritionist. I say, go, whoever you're going to talk to, tell them, go look up your stuff, reach out to you if they have to. Call, we talked about Dan Hellman earlier. So reach out to the people who really know. But for the time being, don't cut it out. Just lower the dosage and let's see how that works, as well as drinking some more electrolyte, whatever your preference is. So am I on the right path there, or is there something I'm missing in the advice I'm giving?
So I would say, in terms of just general guidelines for creatine consumption, I would say for every 5 grams that a person consumes, minimal should be between 10 to 12 ounces of water. That's really important. You alluded to back in the day, it was, typically the protocol was 20 to 30 grams loading phase every day for about 5 to 7 days. And then you back off to half the dosage, not even 5 grams, but it would be half. The other thing that was, in the literature at that particular time was grape juice was like the big one, because grape juice has a lot of glucose. So that was the loading phase that you would use. And now people say that is really what helps get creatine within the muscle, because you're getting insulin release and that sort of thing. I'm sure that'll probably come back. Someone will probably have some of the great creatine products, I'm assuming. So, but sodium is one way to load too. So that's one thing that I would tell people to do, is make sure to do sodium. So sometimes it may be, with some of your young players, it might be hydration and sodium in this sort of environment, just because it's so hot, humid, and they're out and they're losing so much water. So that might be part of it. And that's why, for some people, I will tell them, some of my players, I said, I want you to log your water intake. And so they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, a lot of people, they'll comment. If you're very, very attentive to what people say and you're talking to them, they say, for example, I'll say, oh, how much water are you drinking a day, Pete? And then the typical response is, well, I try to drink 60 ounces a day. I said, well, trying and doing is totally different. So from a clinical perspective, a lot of people, they try, but then I have no idea where their water intake's at. So I say, look, whatever your favorite canteen is, whatever it is, and it's like 16 ounces and you drink 4 of these a day, or you drink 10 of these a day, I want to know what that is so I can get a baseline on you. And in most cases, most people are not drinking the water they think they are. So I would say in some of those young players, you can do that. You go, well, I don't think creatine is probably the issue. You're probably not drinking enough water in some of these extreme temperatures that you're playing at. And then your sodium level is probably not where it should be. So I sometimes I don't blame the supplement right away. I'll look at some other factors to say, hey, I think you're not drinking enough water during these times. So let's maybe up your water beyond the half your body ounces of water, and let's see what happens.
Because you maintain the benefit of the supplement and just increase the things that are going to support that.
Yeah, maybe they just forgot, and they go, oh, I haven't been on it with my water intake. Okay, good reminder, coach. I'm going to go back to that. And I'll go, okay, good. Let's see how you do the next 5 days, and then let's see and reassess from that standpoint.
One thing I want to ask you about, because as we talked about, my health issues and went through that, and lifestyle changes we talked about. It wasn't just, okay, you're going to do this for a year. No, I said I don't want to ever go through that again, so I'll make the full change. But as I look at, I mean, I've become a sad guru fan. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was on Rogan, but he has the Save the Soil. He's been on a number of different shows and podcasts. But
Okay.
you listen to someone like him, or somebody that's a doctor or in the health profession, and looking at just sheer health and the reduction of caloric intake, especially in the United States, where it's gotten out of hand, or at least appears to be. Reduction of caloric intake is a big thing, but some of them go so far as to say you don't need to eat just when you get the trigger that you're hungry, because if you're used to eating 3,000 calories a day, that trigger is going to be kicking on as soon as you start to reduce calories, as you're trying to transition from eating too much to eating what you need. And I've even found some doctors, medical professionals, that had said, just reduce your caloric intake. Okay, that's understandable. And then they ask what number, will knock it down to 17, 1800, 20, whatever you're trying to do.
Right.
But where I run into frustration, and I've talked to many others about this too, is when you're either very active, or you're an athlete looking to go to a professional level, or you're professional level looking to become one of the best in the world. At what point do you differentiate between you need more caloric intake because you're burning much more, versus just you're living life 9 to 5 jobs, spend time with your family, you're not as active just because your life does not allow you to be, and you do need a reduction of calories, versus the people who are extremely active and do need more calories? To me, that seems to be a tug of war, where you got one side that's very smart saying consume less, and one side that's saying, no, you have the energy output, you need to be eating more, just make sure it's good quality food. How do you, it might be a dumb question, but how do you differentiate between the two? And or somebody who's working, but they like to play golf, they like to go to the gym 3-4 days a week, and they're not pushing it hard, they're not trying to set any world records, but they're trying to maintain some type of healthy lifestyle. How do you work with people in those different positions? I know that's a very broad, open question. That's, how do you work with somebody who's not doing much anything versus somebody who's trying to play the PGA Tour or NFL? You've worked with Major League Baseball and a whole bunch of different athletes. I guess the question is, how do you come up with the plan for the individual based off what they want to do and achieve when they come to you?
Yeah, no, it is it's a broad question, but I think where you have to go back to the conversation. So what I mean by that is that when you bring up this guru person, or you might bring up someone else on Rogan, and they're a big proponent of reduced calorie consumption, or they're a big proponent of intermittent fasting, because it's one way to reduce someone's calories, right? You have to think it to where where their expertise is and what the context of what they're talking about. So they might be talking about, this is purely about, okay, we want to try to maximize someone's longevity, like their maximum number of years. So we don't really care about performance, that sort of thing. Like we want, and they'll point to the rat studies and say, look, this group of rats that had the least amount of calories and that did intermittent fasting, they lived the longest, and that sort of thing. But then we have to look at, well, I have a 17-year-old who's, training for the, US Open, and that's not going to be conducive to that particular person. Whereas you brought up a person who maybe plays golf on the weekends. Yes, would they probably benefit from maybe some intermittent fasting or just some calorie reduction one way or another? Yeah, they could potentially do that. And that's where I think, because people don't have the education or background of coaching, then they're just like, oh my God, I'm so confused. Like, this person's saying, well, I got to fast. And then another person's saying, well, no, you need to eat 6 meals a day and you need to eat enough calories. And so it's really dependent upon where that person is in that time and that season, so to speak. So sometimes I'll talk about, okay, well, what's the season of that particular person? So if we're talking about a lot of our elite guys, on the PGA, well, technically they can have kind of an off season,
Mm-hmm.
for let's say 8 weeks to maybe, if they really want to push it, maybe 10 to 12 weeks. But you got a guy that on the Corn Ferry that's really trying to get his card, he's probably not going to have an off season. But then you have like the NFL guys, they have a long off season. So with those types of athletes where they have an off season and they have their in season, and it's really, already, scheduled out, you can have periods where they do some intermittent fasting and they do some, 48-hour fasting if you want. You can do that. But when we're talking about golfers, it's really difficult to do that. And one of the major problems and common themes that I see is with intermittent fasting. And so the first time I learned about intermittent fasting was in 2010. So I would say, in my opinion, John Berardi, JB for short, people that know him in the industry, he really popularized intermittent fasting, kind of brought it to the forefront, just because he has just a huge following, influence, do precision nutrition, that sort of thing. But we were training one time after a conference, 2010, and we were just chit-chatting, geeking out, and he's like, "Rob, you should try it. I've been playing around with it for 6 months." And so ever since then, I've been playing around with it for many, many years, since 2010. And so when we're talking about, and so again, context matters. So when we're talking about golfers in general, unless you are, 65-year-old, you're retired, and okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, my tea time is always at 8 o'clock, you could do intermittent fasting. No problem. That's the key thing with IF. You have to be very consistent with the scheduling. So there's a couple different dysfunctions that I've seen with it. So especially with golf, I've had some of my guys on the tour. They're like, oh, when it first started getting popular and talked about in social media, like, Rob, I want to do intermittent fasting. And I said, okay, well, what's your schedule for the next 4 tournaments? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well, I don't know. I go, I know you don't know. That's the problem. So Thursday, you might tee off at 8, you end at 12, and okay, you could break your fast, have your lunch, that sort of thing. But then Friday, you might have to tee off at 1 o'clock, or you might have to, so the schedule's up and down all the time. So for players on tour, they're not going to be able to keep that schedule. And then even if you aren't a golfer, let's say, and you're listening to the podcast, if you train from 5 to 6 in the morning, because I've seen this happen. I had a client up in the Central Valley, and we got back on a call. She said, Rob, I don't know what's happening. I'm losing so much strength in the gym, and I'm not like, she does these spin classes and cycles, and like my times are going down and my strength is going down. I just don't understand what's going on. So after talking with her, like, what did you change? And I've really changed it. Oh, but I heard about intermittent fasting, so I wanted to do it. So what she would do is, the only time she could train because of her job was 5 to 6. And I said, what are you doing after 6 o'clock? Why shower? And I go to work. And I already knew what she was going to say, but I wanted her to realize what the issue was. She goes, well, I don't eat until 12 o'clock. And I go, well, you just train from 5 to 6. So remember, whenever you're exercising, whether it's weightlifting or powerlifting or Olympic lifting or Swiss ball training, TRX, you're physically tearing down muscle tissue. So that physical tearing down of muscle tissue is a catabolic process. So it's a tissue destructive state. So from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, she's in a catabolic state. She did nothing to stop that catabolism. So that's why you want to eat food after you train, because you want to stop the catabolism. But because she wasn't doing that, she was losing strength. She was losing, or her times were getting longer in her cycling and so forth. So you have to think about the timing. So if you are an avid exerciser, then you want to basically time your exercise. So if you end your fast at 12 noon, then you should train from 11 to 12, and then you break your fast with that meal. That's probably
That makes
the
sense.
most efficient way to do that, so that you don't lose muscle mass over time and you maintain your strength.
Makes
So
total sense. Yeah, it's very
again,
hard to
it's
intermittent fast and play golf. So
correct.
when you don't
Correct.
know, if you know
Yeah.
you might be early one morning and late the next morning, but
Right.
the thing that I found when I tried it and playing was when the hunger came, it came on very quickly and very strong. So it's not like you can have a power bar or a bag full of nuts or something like that, and it's going to hold you for a couple holes. No, it's like that didn't do anything. Didn't even put a dent in the hunger.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, to hell with this. It's not worth it. While trying to play in events, it's too difficult.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, but before I get it's every once in a while it sounds like a truck's going right by your places. Is it the speakers are just picking it up?
I think the speaker's picking up. Let me do this. I need to close the window here, and I think that'll help. And every once in a while, I think there's a truck that's
No
coming
problem.
by. These are new speakers or new headsets, so I think it's
I,
pretty sensitive.
it should edit out the background noise, but if it doesn't, because some of them are like, holy shit, are they right in his studio with him having their engines?
Gotcha.
Not a problem. Um, as we're talking about diet, inflammation, especially with
Yes.
golfers,
Yep.
backs, elbows, hips, etc. That is a very, very big nuisance for golfers, and not only just not in their golf game, but what they realize later on as they get older and in health issues. Inflammation of the body in general is not a good thing, and it's internal, and sometimes you can't feel it. So as far as, I mean, there's ice baths out there and there's saunas and there's a whole bunch of stuff that maybe we can touch on a little later, but as far as nutrition, eating, training, etc., have you found that some of the better ways for golfers to keep inflammation down, because they are notorious for popping ibuprofen and acetaminophen like it's M&Ms?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is your, when someone comes to you or you do their blood panel, which I want to touch on too a little later, you do their blood panel and you say like, holy cow, this is off the charts. We got to get this person on the right track, or they're destined for some bad stuff.
Yeah, this is where we can get into definitely into the weeds in regards to this. So there is a concept in the literature called inflammaging. So, everybody's, for, I don't know, 10 years ago was like all about anti-aging and so forth. And then this one article came out about inflammaging. And so it's not that inflammation is bad. It's just when inflammation gets out of control. It's that old analogy of, a fire's great. Like we can cook our food, it keeps us warm, but if you let it out of control, you get fires in California, which is not so good, like we saw last year. So in that same way, you want a bit of inflammation because it helps you deal with acute injuries, or, after you train, that's a little bit of what you do want. But it's the low-lying chronic inflammation that tends to be the issue. So just from a nutritional perspective, one of the reasons why I came up with the PFF concept, and basically that stands for protein, fat, and fiber. And I wanted to think about something that was really simple for golfers to remember. And so I've always said that your BFF for blood sugar control is PFF. So protein, fats, and fiber. Real quickly, all of them, they could help control blood sugar. They essentially flatline it. So I joke around, but it's not really a joke. But sometimes when I'm working with some of the U.S. national junior players, I say, look, you may not agree with everything, and you may still want your Sour Patches or your Skittles or whichever, but first eat a PFF meal before you do that, and then enjoy your Skittles or your Sour Patches. Because once you add the protein, fats, and fiber, it's like a 1 + 1 + 1 equals not a 3 effect, but like a 4 or 5 effect in the context of blood sugar. So it really helps to flatline it. So then when you add in your sugar, it might not put you on the roller coaster. It just kind of maybe will put you on the little roller coaster. Okay. So the reason why I bring that up is because glucose stability is really, really important in the body. So your body has a very exquisite system to stabilize it. If you eat too much sugar or if you blood sugar drops too low, then hormones are released to try to stabilize it. So when your blood sugar is either too low, you go either hypoglycemic or you're reactive hypoglycemia because of your choices. Cortisol is one of the hormones that is there to help bring your blood sugar back to a more normal level. Now, cortisol, depending on who you hear from, tends to get a bad rap, so to speak. They say, oh, cortisol is bad because it's producing stress. Therefore, stress is bad and it creates all kinds of problems. Well, cortisol is there for a reason. You should have a certain amount of it, not too much, not too little. Now, like I said before, cortisol's job is to bring up blood sugar. Um, its name is glucocorticoid, so it's helping to establish blood sugar. But it has many other jobs in the body. So one of the major jobs of cortisol in your body is to have an anti-inflammatory effect. Thus, if a person has, golfer has, a frozen shoulder or they have golfer's elbow, what is a pain doc going to do? They're typically going to, hey, let's give you an injection of cortisone. Let's see how that does over the next couple weeks because it has a highly anti-inflammatory effect. Now, we all have that cortisol production in our body naturally. So we want to have that be useful in the rest of the body. But if you don't control your blood sugar and it's like a roller coaster all day because you're not making the right choices with your food or your timing is off, then you're wasting that cortisol to deal with blood sugar instead of dealing with the inflammation in your shoulder or your elbow or your low back, your knee, that sort of thing. So that is why I always see on a week to week basis, whenever I'm talking with clients after we change our nutrition and we start to stabilize your blood sugar, they're like, hey, Rob, I'm doing good. I'm like, well, how are you feeling? Before you said you wake up and you're quite achy and your knees are kind of sore. Well, actually, that's actually pretty much gone ever since we changed hydration and we changed the food around. So at that point, we haven't done anything else. The only thing we did was hydration and change your food around to stabilize your blood sugar. So it's a very powerful way to try to help on the biochemical level to deal with their aches and pains. Now, I always tell people, because I have a background in strength and conditioning as a strength coach, you have to rub it where it hurts. So obviously, if there's a meniscus issue or they've got an issue with their labor in the shoulder, yes, you got to deal with that in a structural context. But I would say in a far majority of cases with a lot of our players that are popping to Advils and things like that, if they do feel better, then you have to be the little 3-year-old and be annoying, be like, why? Why? Why is that helping? Why is that helping? So food is obviously a factor. Digestion can be a factor. Um, one of the two key markers or three key markers I look for inflammation is HSCRP, which stands for highly sensitive C-reactive protein. So that's one thing that we look at for systemic inflammation. Two is homocysteine. And then a third one that really doctors should test on everybody, but they don't, is the AA-EPA ratio. And basically what that is AA is arachidonic acid and EPA is eicosapentaenoic acid. It's one of the omega-3s, okay? But it's very much related to dealing with inflammation in the body at a systemic level. And that's only one aspect of the importance of omega-3 balance and that sort of thing. But those are the typical things I'll be looking at with some of my players that are having inflammation. And so once you start to take care of those things, then the aches and pains start to diminish. They start to feel better. They're not as inflamed and they recover at a much more efficient rate.
For younger golfers, let's say 20s, early 20s to down to teens, do you see that their ability to focus and anxiety levels lowers as they remove excessive refined carbohydrates and stick to more proteins and fats? It kind of when you get older, you get achy joints and things like that you talked about. What I found, even in myself, and I'm not even young, that I've eaten clean for so long, if I do have a cheat day, pizza, if it's pizza night because we're going to watch a football game or it's whatever, if I do eat that, I usually find the next day I am not quite as calm or clear headed as I was when I was eating clean. So it's like you're burning clean fuel versus burning bad fuel. But I have noticed it with myself and a fair number of younger students that and it's not like glaringly obvious on the golf course that, oh, this kid's just can't keep his anxiety down. He's fidgety, he's this and that. It's just, no, myself and the kids I've talked to said, no, I just, it's like, I get a little too nervous at times, and I can't seem to rein that back in. Have you seen anything similar? Is that like the anxiety might be the younger kid version, and the achy joints might be the older adult tell for too much inflammation and refined carbs in the diet?
Well, it's when you brought up the young junior who, is anxious, or they get pissed off, and they're pissed off for not just the one hole, but they're pissed off for the remaining round, and they're not controlling themselves on the mental emotional side of things. Sometimes it's not as easy as, hey, just cut the sugar out, get the bad stuff out. Like I said before, sometimes it's a matter of me just saying, hey, you know, I know you like your, what is it, the Valley granola bars, or you like, I mean, the big thing that drives me nuts is the Crustables, right? That's a huge thing. It's kind of taken over for us. It was the what do you call it? Um the Pop Tarts, right? Like that's what I grew up eating.
Oh yeah,
right? But the
great
new
back
thing
then.
for the kids now is Crustables, right? So sometimes I just say, look, okay, you can have that, but what I want you to do is have a couple beef sticks before you have it, okay? And sometimes that's enough to just, again, prevent them being on the roller coaster and just kind of keeping them a little more flatline. Because if you think about the heartbeat of a human being's heart, they look at you and they want your heart rate going like that, right? They want it going up and down. That's the worst thing we can do in the context of blood sugar. So we want it to flatline. We want it to flatline, or maybe be slightly kind of be going up when we're talking about blood sugar. So sometimes it's a matter of, hey, let's get you to do a beef stick, and let's get you to have, some almonds or some cashews before you have your Crustables, and then sometimes that's enough to do that. Now, some of these elite players that are maybe the elite AMs, I'm like, no, like if you want to be on top, you want to play on the tour, you got to start cleaning this stuff up now, because this is easily something that you can do, and then you'll be much more even keel. You won't be as pissed off. You won't be as anxious. You won't be as nervous. Because one of the things we do know is the instability of blood glucose will lead to anxiety, mild depression, will lead to cognition issues, ADD, whatever you want to call it. So that's why you have to make sure that you stabilize your blood sugar, because it affects the physiology on the brain perspective, your energy. People that say they have brain fog in the morning, that's why you want to keep that blood sugar as stable as you can. Then you're going to have a lot less side effects later down the road, or less fatigue, that sort of thing. And that player, their perception will be, hey, I feel pretty good. Not that, oh, I'm tired, I'm dragging, or you as a coach or the parents like, hey, yeah, down the stretch, 14, 15, 16, 17, they lost it. I noticed their concentration was off. Yeah.
Yes. It seems like Tiger might have made it popular. I don't know if he invented it, but the peanut butter and banana sandwiches while you're playing golf, I didn't ever do it, because by the time I had heard about it, I had gone through my issues, and I'm not eating bananas, have that spike while I'm playing golf. But I was at a tournament last week, and one of the guys I was rooming with said, I think I might try these peanut butter and banana sandwiches, because he said, I'm running out of steam. I said, well, you're going to have a spike, and you might still run out of steam.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned Crustables, that's the first thing that jumped in my mind. I wanted to tell him I had a bunch of chicken sticks in my bag. I said, here, grab a couple of those, because I think they'll serve you better. It seems subtle if you know to look for it. You don't really know to look for it until you've removed that type of thing from your diet and gone to a beef stick or a chicken stick, or even a protein drink is better than again, a Crustable or a Pop-Tart. But you don't realize it until you actually go through it, and then you get that baseline like you talked about. And then once you go back and you have it, like, oh my God, this is like a rush.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe sometimes just the golfers have to see it or experience it, the bad, before they can understand, oh, geez, Robert was right all along.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. So if someone tests positive on, let's say, gluten sensitivity and so forth, and they've been clean for, let's say, 60 days, and then they go out there and they have pizza, or they have, wheat bread or pasta or whatever, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so bad, Rob. I broke it." And I said, "Well, how did you feel?" It's like, "Oh, I felt horrible. I have digestive stuff going on, and I had brain fog for like half a day or the next day." I go, "It's okay. Now you own it. Now you know what it feels like to be off of it. Now you know when it feels like when you have exposure to it. So just minimize the exposure as you move forward, so that we can, one, have you feel really good with your energy, not have digestive stuff going on. And so that you can practice more and play more, train more in the gym if you need to for whatever your goals are, so that you can progress. Because obviously, when you progress, you have fun. If you're not progressing, you're not having fun. So we have to
Exactly.
intertwine those two, that they have to have fun and they have to progress. And if you progress, you have fun, you're having fun, you're progressing. So you got to do those two things.
How often should people be eating over the course of the round? So let's say they're going to get out there an hour early. They're going to warm up. They're going to chip, putt, hit balls, take their time. They're going to play their round. Usually, God, when we were young, if you were 4 hours, you were slow. Now it seems to be you're going to play five. Then you might hit balls after. So I mean, they're out
Yeah.
there 6 hours at a time.
Yeah.
How often should they be eating during the course of their round?
It's a really good question, and it does come down to an individual player. So in the book, Hole in One Nutrition, I do give some different sort of schemes of, okay, this is what it would look like if you snacked once during the front nine and once during the back nine, or this would be where it would look like where you have two snacks in the front nine, two in the back nine. Um, it also depends upon their breakfast too. So when they're going to be on the course for 6 hours, because they might, interviews after and they practice after and whatever else they're going to be doing. So that's why, golf is a very interesting game, is in the fact that there's just such a huge, huge gap of time where you can't actually physically sit down and eat. So that's why whatever they're choosing to do for breakfast over here really is going to dictate how they feel, but also how they fuel. So I try to get a player that I'm working with to try to have as big breakfast as they can. And sometimes we might have to go overboard. We're like, "Whoa, Rob, that was too much." Like I felt like it kind of affected my ability for my energy and for practice, and that's okay. Then we dial it back a little bit, but we want to try to maximize the amount of food that they can get at breakfast. And one of the main reasons I try to get my players to do that is called the second meal phenomenon. And so basically, what that means is that whatever they're choosing to do uh, for breakfast and then the type of food is going to dictate their blood sugar at around 1 or 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So obviously that's really critical if they're down the home stretch at 16, 17, 18. So if they choose to eat cereal with some yogurt and a bunch of fruit, well, their blood sugar is going to probably be like this all throughout the round, and their body's trying to play catch up. Whereas if you have maybe some whole eggs, and then you have maybe some oatmeal with some blueberries, and then you have some nuts in there, now you got a decent amount of protein, fat, fiber, your blood sugars would be nice and stable. So they won't feel as hungry. They won't be distracted by, "Oh, what am I gonna eat for lunch?" Or "I'm really like wanting this right now." Um, because that does happen. I've had players say, "Yeah, I was just
Yes.
like kind of distracted, like I'm kind of starving right now." So, um, and again, all this, I just want to make sure that people realize is done before a tournament. So, like when we had all the NCAA here, because I ride in San Diego at Omni in La Costa, I'm getting all these calls of, some of the elite AMs and like, "Oh, what should I do before a tournament?" I said, "Well, this is not the time to experiment." Um, if I see some glaring mistakes of what they're doing, you know, then I'll say, "Okay, let's do this. Let's have you add this in there, and let's try to, have more of a stabilizing effect on their blood sugar." But if they're like, "Hey, Rob, I heard that Huberman said I'm not drinking coffee anymore. I'm going to go off of coffee." I'm like, "Uh-uh." I
Mm,
go, "No,
not
you
now.
stay on your coffee through this tournament. Then when you get some downtime, then we can start to play around with that. But you don't want to make any drastic changes before, a race, tournament, whatever that is. That's a big no-no. But for some reason, people, they hear about something and they go, "Oh God, this has probably got to work for me. So I'm going to do it the night before a tournament," and then, you know, they're in the toilet all morning or whatever else happens. So,
Yes.
when you're
They wonder
trying
why
to
it goes
change
sideways.
things, yeah, you always want to do these things on an off week, play around with it, see how you do, and then fine tune it for yourself. Like obviously, general recommendations, I'm saying PFF, protein, fats, and fiber, but sometimes um, I will maybe use as a base. But if I have a 16-year-old who's 6'2", 140 pounds soaking wet, I'm like, hey, every time you eat, you have to have rice, some potatoes, some type of carbohydrate so we can keep your blood sugar up. We can keep your weight up because every time he goes away for 4 weeks, he loses 8 pounds. That's not good.
Mm.
So
What
we do have
you
to,
had mentioned
individualize it.
you had mentioned on the course, so what to eat. So like beef sticks, I mentioned chicken sticks. I've done both. Beef jerky, I would assume. Nuts would be the preferred fat that you prescribe, let's so to speak, to some of your players, or is it something else?
No, I mean, it depends on the particular player. So if we use the beef sticks as kind of foundation for some protein, then they can pick, nuts. I like seeds. If I can get a player to go with either maybe like a sunflower seed or pumpkin seed, I try to get them to do that. And the reason being is if you compare side by side, a handful of sunflower seeds versus a handful of almonds, the fat content is about the same, pretty much. The protein content maybe is a little bit more in the sunflower seeds, so that's one of the benefits. But the fiber content is much greater in seeds, whether it's sunflower seed or pumpkin seeds versus a nut. So that's why if I can get them to do that, then we have that again, that sort of gel-like structure in their digestive system that forms as it's going through the digestive process. So we
Mm.
really avoid any sort of spike at all with those particular types of players. And then if they're like, hey, I want something refreshing, have an apple or grapes or something like that, then that, they can add that to
Something
that.
low glycemic as far as the fruit. You got to
I
keep
mean,
it
at
low in
that
it.
point, sometimes I was really a stickler on that, but I just leave it up to the player. I said, as long as you're having, some protein, some beef jerky, and you get some seeds, and then just if you want mangoes or whatever, or you want, I'm okay with that. Just try to combine it together because what that'll do is that'll prevent you from feeling like you're having a sugar rush or anything like that. And that's kind of the
Hmm.
key thing. Um, but like I said, I mean, that's why I talk to the player. I go, what are you willing to do? So I'm like, well, I want to just do a bar. I go, okay, then we have to find a bar that is as clean as possible. And then we might add like a mini beef stick to it just to increase the protein intake a little bit. Because all that stuff matters. And especially with, because obviously we're coming through August and, a lot of the young, juniors have had a lot of tournaments through June and July. Like I had one player went and lost 15 pounds in about
Wow.
7 weeks. That's not good. Um,
Hmm.
Now there are some other things, like for example, the training could have been better and more consistent, but the eating was not there. So when they're playing that many tournaments and week to week, a week after week, every little bit does matter. So I said, hey, look, you got to be cognizant about, yeah, if you play 4 days in a row, you're only getting a breakfast and a dinner. So you got to try to make up some space. So this is a really good case where, yeah, fasting or low calorie is not conducive to this athlete. We want to get more calories in there because what's happening is they're losing lean body mass. And then one, from a performance perspective, their distance goes down, but more importantly, if they lose muscle mass, now they're predisposing themselves to musculoskeletal injuries. Because one of the
Hmm.
things we do know is that muscle mass around your joints, your low back, your glutes, etc., they're protective against injuries. They take up load, right? And they take up the exposures of just the swing mechanics of just the amount of load that's put in to the body. So we want to put that into the muscles and not into the ligamentous structures or the
Do you
tendons.
try to stay with whole foods as much as possible, as opposed to protein drinks or protein shakes?
You
Either
mean during and
pre,
around
during, or
or?
before. Yeah, or either or. I mean, it's convenient to take a protein drink on the golf
Yeah,
course. They come in
yeah,
cardboard, and it's
right. Yeah, what I try to do is for example, if I have an athlete who, let's say I have someone, at the elite level. So, I try to get them to eat as much whole food during the round. And because, let's say they finish at 4 p.m. and then they might have some interviews and then they're like,
Mhm.
okay, I got to work on a little bit of putting. Like I have to get this out of my head, whatever reason. Like they might not get to food for almost 2 hours because by the time they actually drive back to the hotel or get to the hotel, then they go to a restaurant, so they shower, clean up. It's like
Mhm.
2.5 hours. So in
Yeah.
that context, I may say, look, once you get off the course and you're doing your interviews, you have a shaker with protein powder in there and you have an extra piece of fruit. You shake that up. And by the time before you go practice putting, you're drinking that shake, you're having your banana, your apple, whatever. That way you get some food in your system before you, go out to dinner. Because it's just a matter of at that point getting some calories in. Um, is a protein shake more efficient after a round of golf? Maybe to a certain degree because it's liquid, right?
Mhm.
And so, do you burn calories playing golf? Yeah. Do you burn the same amount of calories you playing an hour and a half of basketball? Probably not, right? So, like, is there going to be a lot of what we technically say glycogen repletion and that sort of thing? Probably not. It's just a matter of okay, let's get in some good clean calories before have to go get some regular food. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
and
a
I would
time
have to
gap that
imagine
happens.
you eliminate that drop in that spike. So if they're going multiple hours from post round to by the
Yeah.
time they eat, and they got to drop, and now they're going to
Yeah.
eat, and then they're going to spike, and then they got to go back to the hotel and try to relax while they're trying to digest it. That just gets them in that roller coaster
Yeah.
cycle again. That's not
And it,
going to at that
yeah,
level. It's so small of margins that things like that can have a big effect.
yeah. And just getting, a couple of scoops of protein, some fruit after the round, and then they feel, oh, okay, that kind of tides me over. And then they eat a good amount of food, but they're not overeating. Because then becomes a whole nother issue where they're so hungry that they just like they order like a seafood diet, right? And they just eat everything. And then they're like, oh man, I feel like I can't digest
Yeah,
food. And
move.
then it affects their sleep. And then they wake up in the next morning, right? And they have an early tea time, then they're kind of screwed because then they're like, I can't
Hmm.
really eat that much food because I'm full from the night before. So
Yes.
there's all those kinds of things that I've come across over the last like 15 years working with players. So that's why, I wanted to try to convey that in the book so that people go, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. Okay, I should start thinking about that because that has a huge hand in things because then the next morning when they have an early tea time, their energy may be horrible because they just couldn't eat enough food in the morning for the rest
Mhm.
of the day, to stabilize their blood sugar.
Yeah, and even if for people who are out there, let's say they're middle aged and they're traveling, they're going to abandoned dunes, or they're going to what's the one in Florida? Can't think of it, but or they're coming to Hilton Head, big golf destination. Most hotels will have hard boiled eggs that you can either,
Mm,
if you're not hungry first thing in the morning because you went out with your group that night, grab a couple, put them in a napkin, and put them in your golf bag, and you can have it on the fourth, fifth hole.
yep.
It's not like if you make the effort and you know what to do, or you're even older. Let's say because I'm getting to a point I don't eat as much, even as active as I try to be. I don't eat anywhere near as much in my 50s as I did in my 30s, or even especially in the 20s. And it's like, uh, again, if I eat too late, I have that problem. Okay, I'll eat something in the
Right.
morning because I've done this long enough and made enough mistakes. I'll know to eat something nutritious, and I won't have again the peaks and valleys. Um, you do with your clients, you do blood work, and
Mhm.
if anyone follows you or reads your material, it's at least once a year. Um, what do you see with most people where they're lacking, whether it's through their diet or their lifestyle? When you get blood work, are you seeing anything that's repetitive or popping up more so than in other things? And do you do also when you work with somebody, are you also doing urine test, stool testing to check the gut and the whole system in addition to the blood?
Yeah, normally what I do is I run a full panel blood work on everybody I work with. So the reason why I do that, that gives me a baseline so I can see how they're doing from a hormonal standpoint in terms of all their sex hormones, thyroid hormones, looking at all the inflammation markers. and looking at standard things like their blood glucose or lipids and see if there's any sort of risk factors. And then the other things that I'll be looking at is iron levels. So, for example, if I'm working with young females, then that's always a concern, depending where their menstrual cycle's at. Um, on the flip side, one of the big things that I'm seeing all the time is that the iron levels tend to be too high in people. And just remember that this is why we have reference ranges. And unfortunately, the reference ranges on standard blood work, it will vary from lab to lab, but overall, the ranges are way too wide. So, for example, ferritin is a storage form of iron marker, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also what we look at for possibly an acute phase reactant, meaning there's some kind of inflammation going on in the body. And some of the lab ranges are 30 to 400. I'm like, well, what do you do with that? That doesn't tell you anything. So that's why the medical community is like, well, you're 399, so you're fine. I go, no, there's something happening. You've got a lot of inflammation, and it looks like based on that and another marker, you've got way too much iron in your system. So just as much as iron is important for carrying oxygen in your blood and to your brain and to your tissues, if you have too much iron, then it becomes a pro-oxidant, meaning it's like it's rusting out your tissues. So I
Mm-hmm.
live near the coast. I live like a 10-minute walk from the beach. So we surf all the time. So if we're loading up the truck, we're always around the salt water. So I've got rust on my truck everywhere. Well, you have too much iron in your body, that's rusting out tissues. It's rusting out connective tissue. It's causing damage to your liver, your intestinal lining, etc. So that becomes a real big problem. And I'm always looking for that um, in males and females. It doesn't matter. So that's something that I always look at, especially if they're constantly waking up with aches and pains and things of that sort, and they're fatigued or brain fog, that kind of thing, because it can go the other way with too much iron as well. Um, and like I alluded to earlier, the EPA, the DHA, that is something that I always look at because most people don't get enough omega-3s, and it's always in the
Yeah.
blood work where they're just not getting enough. And so we either need to supplement it, or I tell people, look, you don't have to take 3 fish oil caps that I'm recommending twice a day. You just have to eat things like herring, mackerel, sardines, those kinds of things, but you need to eat them twice a day.
Mm.
People are like, well, I'm not going to do that. I go, well, that's why we use supplements. So when people say, oh, you can get everything for your food, they're just quite ignorant to the fact that there's certain nutrients. It depends on where your food, or where you're getting it from,
Yes.
and the types of food you're consuming. So that's not, a blanket statement you can make. Um, and then, from there, if things like the white blood cells are really low, or for example, kidney markers like what we call bun creatinine, bun creatinine ratio, those things are off, then I'm going, there's look like there's some leaky gut going on. And so I run a separate panel for leaky gut and some food sensitivities. And if leaky gut markers are really high, then at that time I say we're going to run a stool sooner than later, because there's something that's driving um, these markers up. And one common theme is there's 2 main liver function markers that I typically run. So it's ALT and AST. So alanine transaminase, aspartate transaminase. They're basically the ones that tell us, hey, something's going on in the liver. So if someone puts a person on a statin medication, that's a cholesterol lowering medication, or they're on some
Mm-hmm.
kind of medication, the docs will check this. Okay, well, you're going to check this on a yearly basis to make sure they're not going too high, because then that means there's too much stress on the liver. But in many cases, they may not be on a medication. And the second question the doc asks is, well, how much alcohol do you drink a week, Pete? Like, I don't drink any alcohol. They're like, oh, okay, well, how much soda do you drink a day? Because soda has a lot of high fructose corn syrup. So those are the kind of the 3 main things: medication, alcohol, and high fructose corn syrup that tends to drive up liver enzymes. They go, well, I don't do any of
Hmm.
those. They go, oh, well, your blood sugar's fine. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you just have high. There's a reason why that's high. So that's why I get into my 3-year-old mode and go, why? Why? Why is that high? So that's when I start to look at, okay, if your leaky gut markers are high, what ends up happening is if you have a leaky gut, whatever you're eating, whether it's organic food or 7-Eleven diet, or you have medication, or you have alcohol, stuff is getting into your bloodstream. Okay. So it's going through the gut lining and it has free access to the bloodstream. That's not how it should be. It should be a closed border. Okay. There should be no gaps. But when you have leaky gut, it's irritated. They pop open. So I'm over at the small intestine. You're the blood, your sacred territory, Pete. So what ends up happening is whatever you're eating, consuming through your mouth, it goes straight into the bloodstream. And that causes havoc, bells, whistles, alarms, fire trucks, they come out. And that's what we call systemic inflammation. And if it's of a bacteria origin from what we call lipopolysaccharides, then that causes systemic inflammation. And so if they have an irritated elbow or if they have a irritated rotator cuff, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. So these are all little sort of marker trails to tell me that, hey, there's possibly something going on in the gut. All right, we're going to run a gut panel, even though they might not have diarrhea, constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, that kind of thing. And it's really quite eye-opening to see this day in, day out, because I get labs always, like I have labs in my email right now that I have to go over with the client or player. And so it's something that needs to be addressed because it's kind of like an iceberg, right? It's a hidden iceberg. So there's a lot of underlying things that are driving some of these things. So if you start to deal with them, then people start to feel better. They're less symptomatic. They recover better. They recover faster. So those are the things that I start with. And then if we need to do some specific hormonal testing, then we'll do some saliva testing, that kind of thing. But the blood work is really standard to get that baseline to see where someone's at.
Do you see, obviously with males, well, even females to some extent, but testosterone levels, the cause or the reasoning that it has been dropping persistently or consistently over the last, 5-6 decades? Is it nutritional deficiencies? Is it lack of physical activity, or i.e. exercise, moving heavy things at certain times and doing things that no one seems to be doing anymore? Is it a combo of both? What have you seen, or is your opinion on that, or if you have one?
Both those things and 7 other things. So that's
probably
why
do a whole episode on that.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other episode in itself. So most people know about menopause for a female, right? So after the age of 50-ish or so, they don't have a period for about a year. That's full-blown menopause. So now the term andropause is coming out, low levels of androgens and that sort of thing. And again, it comes back to a 3-year-old. So why? And that's why, I usually give an average of whether you use a medication, a supplement, or you do some kind of change. Usually like a third of people won't notice anything. A third of people will go like, oh my God, sing the praises of whatever the change is. And then a third of people will get worse. And that's kind of what you see with TRT, with testosterone replacement therapy. The really good docs, they test their particular patients. And then they go, okay, yeah, you have low testosterone, low free testosterone, but then they look at stress markers and then they look at gut issues and possibly thyroid issues to see what else could be driving some of that. If they don't sleep well, you have to fix that, because if you artificially start jabbing them and get them up to super physiologic doses of testosterone, there's a potential that testosterone will be converted into estrogen or to too much DHT.
Right.
Just because you inject a hormone or take a hormone, it doesn't mean it stays that way in the body. So depending on what the sort of biochemistry of that particular person, whatever's happening, may dictate where that hormone goes or where it gets converted to. And this is why, like for example, inflammation is a real big problem in terms of hormones. So just imagine if, like, what kind of car do you drive?
Lexus SUV.
Okay, so you have to put a key in there, or it's a keyless or whatever.
Keyless, yep.
Okay, so imagine if you have your car, right, and it's in a parking lot. Some punk kids, they put a bunch of gum in your keyhole, and you go to open your car. You don't have a keyless, okay? Well, obviously you're going, what the heck is going on here? I can't open the car because there's gum in there. That is what inflammation does to your hormone receptors in your body. So if a TRT clinic are prematurely gives a person testosterone replacement therapy without dealing with the overinflammation, the low chronic inflammation, the likelihood of that testosterone working very efficiently, very unlikely. It's not going to work very well because those receptors are dealing with inflammation. It's like gumming up the receptors, the inflammation. So you
Hmm.
have to deal with the inflammation at hand and then eventually, okay, let's maybe possibly get that person to go on testosterone replacement therapy. So there's lots of factors to look at. And unfortunately, I see this hand on hand. I mean, guys will get, a lot of testosterone. There's a honeymoon phase, and all of a sudden they get all puffy and bloated, and then they get man boobs, and they're going, "What the hell is going on?" And they're like pissed off and then crying at the same time,
Wow.
and their hormones are all over the place because they didn't really deal with the other problems that are potentially
Hmm.
drivers of lowering their testosterone level.
God, it's no wonder that there's so many discussions about all these things online because I mean we're barely scratching the surface on a number of different things and
Yeah, but even then, so obviously, like, I don't.
yeah, do the fundamentals that get your body in somewhat of homeostasis, or at least as close as you can, and then if you need then let you utilize it as a supplemental uh, solution. But let's work on the big things, the fundamental stuff first. As technology has changed the coaching world as far as helping people with their swings with force plates and kinematic sequence and kinetic chains and all this ability to measure launch monitors, TrackMan, Flight Scope, Foresight, all these things that have helped our side of the business. Where do you see the health and fitness and nutrition side going? What direction, and where do you think it'll be in the next 3, 5, or 10 years? It's amazing. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Hmm. Wow. It's amazing. You know what I found out? Technology can be a great thing if it's supplemental. And some of the best coaches I've had on, as far as golf is concerned, some of the best trainers and nutritionists like yourself, all have said very similar in that they will utilize their experience and knowledge, and then they will maybe use the technology to verify whether the things that they implemented worked. And if they worked, okay, great, we'll continue this. But if they needed to make an adjustment, they can make an adjustment. They don't use it to verify their theory. They use it to check to see what level of effectiveness their knowledge had on that person. And I just don't understand why the masses, maybe it's the social media effect, seem to think that, oh, it's got to be all tech, it's got to be all tech. No, you have to have. There is no substitute for experience and knowledge. Uh, Even with AI, I mean, maybe we get there someday. I don't know. I'm not a big AI person. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about it outside of it's rapidly improving. But I still don't see the best of the best utilizing it solely. They're utilizing years and decades of knowledge, experience, education, continuing to learn, and then using those things to check like double checking. You know, when we were in school, they got double checked to see if their summary and what they thought was they're doing was correct, which usually it turns out to be. Mm. Yeah, I think we've already seen that. Dropping, the studies are coming out precipitously. Yes. You got a few more minutes? We can do emergency 9, just a 9 quick questions at the end. If not, we can do, okay, cool. It's always a fun way to okay. Um, Ryder Cup's coming up, and they usually been playing a song to get the crowd pumped up. If you were walking out for your what song would you have them play for your walk up song? Oh, there's a good one. That is a good one. Um, I saw, your wife, I believe it's your wife's Angie. Hey, y'all have your Angie's recipes. I'm going to try some of those, but not to get her mad at me, even though I've never met her. But if you could put any restaurant that you wanted to in your kitchen, what restaurant are you going to have in there? Maybe give her a break. Hmm. Very cool. I have to get there someday. I will get to Southern California. Interested to hear your answer on this one. Most used app on your phone. Ah, should have known watching you some of your posts. Hmm. Mm. The high, the surfing high. It makes sense. Hollywood calls you. They say, Rob, we've been following your career. We really impressed by what you've done, and we're going to make a movie about you, and we're going to let you pick any actor that you want to play you. Who are you going to have them pick? I like to think have a unique podcast, so I try to come up with some interesting questions. All right, that's a cool one. Try and get through these quick. I don't want to hold you up too long. If you could train any historical figure, anybody that you could pick anybody to train in the world, past or present. Who would be your number one person to work with? Nutrition, training, etc. That's okay. When if you come up with it, do a quick short Instagram and say, "Hey, I got my answer." Couple more, and then I get you on to the next thing. Your favorite purchase in the last year under $1,000 could be a piece of equipment, something you use just around the house. Mhm. Cool, very cool. In your opinion, because you've been around golf a long time and food, of course, what is worse, a well done steak or iron covers? Okay. And then and then the last one, everybody gets this one. In your opinion, as far as golfers are concerned, who's the GOAT? Greatest of all time? Okay. Mhm. Yes. Your book again, we'll have it, Hole in One Nutrition: A Guide to Fueling Better Golf is out, and we'll link to that. And you're working on another one, is the rumor? Oh, makes sense. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, social media, and of course, we'll have all those linked in the summary. But go ahead and if they're listening, they can write it down. Do Very cool. I appreciate it. I know you got to run. I don't want to hold you. Thank you very much for coming on. I'm sure everyone's going to take a lot from this. Hopefully, I'll reach out to you and say, "Hey, I want your help. I need your help," and you can get them straight. Awesome. Hang out if you would hang out just 1 second, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again, and we'll talk soon.